All right, friends, welcome. We are doing a little breakout session. So this is just before class. We're going to walk through what we call iterables, or if we want to iterate through some value, if I want to check piece by piece or a certain condition, I totally can. Two ways that we're going to do an iterable is a for loop and a while loop, but we're really just going to do for loops in this class. Really, there's certain situations that you'll do a while loop, but nothing we're really dealing with. Before I dive into really what is a for loop and how to do it, we should talk about why we would do a for loop, or why would we want to iterate through some data. Well, if I'm in Python, or if I'm in our Colab sheet, if I wanted to print the number one, what could I write? What could I put in my cell right here to just show the number one?
One.
Yeah, what could I just put one? What would I have to do? Okay, I'm running the cell. It's initializing. Okay, so it has one, but really that's just because Colab shows the last and most recent piece. If I wanted to show this, what would I do? What's the built-in method in Python?
Print.
Yeah, I'd have to say print one, right? I'd have to say print one. What if I wanted to print all numbers from 1 to 10? Well, you could see that if I were to do it like this, print 2, print 3, that can be really tedious and really inefficient. So when we have something like that, where we're wanting to do a repetitive task over and over and over again, instead of having to do something like print 1, print 2, print 3, I can do what we call a loop. And that is where I loop through some data and do a repetitive task over and over and over again. Okay, so let's say we did want to just get all of the numbers. I'm going to do this here. I'm going to say print all numbers between 1 and 2. Okay, well, we've seen that we could do print 1, print 2, print 3, but that's not really good. We're better than that. We can do, I'm going to say not good. We can do better than that. So what I could do if I wanted to print all numbers, I'm going to iterate through numbers 1 through 10. Before I do that, there's a couple things I could do. I could say all numbers equals, and in this case, I'm going to make a list of my values. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Cool. I have all my numbers, and let's say I just wanted to iterate through all of them. Well, there's a couple ways I can do that. And this is going to get a little bit interesting at the beginning, but we'll go from there. First, if I want to just get all of these values, I've got this list name right here called all numbers, right? That's my variable that the data or the value of this variable is a list. If I were to say type all numbers, it would give me back list, right? So all numbers represents a list. Well, because it's a list, if I wanted to iterate through and get all of the values, what I could say is, got that, perfect, it shows my list. I could say for, now this next piece, you're gonna often see I or J or num. What I'm trying to communicate is whatever you see after this for, so this value or this variable, basically, it's like a placeholder, can be whatever you wanted it to be. I'm going to put unicorn just to show that it can be anything you wanted, but just know that typically we're going to want to do like an I or a num or a J. But again, just to show that it can be anything, we're going to keep it as unicorn. So I'm going to say for unicorn in, and now what do I want to iterate through? I want to iterate through this specific list. Well, I could say all numbers. When I say for, that is declaring and letting Python know, okay, I am starting a for loop. I create this variable that is basically a placeholder of my values. And then I have to say, what do I want to iterate through? I finish with a colon, and then I press return. And then you see, just like when we talked about functions, that we have to have an indentation. Again, all of the code indented under this for unicorn and all numbers. is going to be associated to this for loop until it reaches a line of code not indented. So if I just want to print, well, what is the thing that is keeping track of all my numbers? What was the variable name we created?
All
Was it?
numbers.
All numbers is my list. What is the other
Unicorn.
variable?
Oh, unicorn.
Unicorn.
Sorry.
Yeah, so if I say unicorn, if I do this and I run this cell, now you see I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if I say for unicorn in all numbers, and now I'm going to go ahead and change unicorn to num, just so that way we can, be a little bit better. Again, if I run it, same thing, num just represents us going into this list of all numbers. It starts, and just notice this, if I want to go through everything, I can use this for num in all numbers. It will start at the first value in my list and go all the way to the end. Any questions on this?
Can you just do a range?
I
instead?
can, that's my next thing I'm going to do. But range is a little bit different. Any other questions? Okay. So that's us iterating through this list. Now, if I wanted to do a number, so Ashley, great question. Here, I have this list of all numbers, but sometimes I don't have a list or I don't want to make a list. What if it was 100? I don't want to go through and make a new list, right? Of 1 all the way to 100. That's where a different for loop can come in. I can say for. Again, I can say num or I or j. So I'm going to say for num in. Now, if I say range, this is a built-in method within Python that allows me to create a range or of values, so it returns an object that produces a sequence of integers from start to stop, exclusive by step. So let's walk through what that means. Range has 3 options I can do. Here we see we have a start, a stop, and a step. So if I want to start at 1, I'm going to put 1, comma. Now you see, where do I want to stop it at? Well, if I said 10, it's going to go up to, but not including 10. So in this case, if I wanted through all of 1 through 10, I'm actually going to say 11. And this last part is this, what we call a step. Now, what that really is do you want to go every single one or do you want to skip a couple? So if I say 1 right here, that's going to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. If I were to say 2, that's going to start at 1. And then each time the for loop iteration is done, it's going to add 2 more. So it's going to go from 1 to 3 to 5 to 7 to 9. That's what that step is doing. But we'll just start with 1 at the beginning. If I do this, I can do the same thing. So I can say print num. And I still get 1 through 10. Now let's go ahead and change that step just to show what happens if I change that. I still am starting at 1. I'm going all the way up to, but not including 11. But now I'm stepping by 2. If I run this, I get 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So the step is just how many of the positions you're going to go. But what's cool about range is by default, if I don't pass in a step, let's say I do want to go through every single piece of information within my list or within my range. If I only give 2 arguments, 1 and 11, what Python will do is it's going to read that and it's going to say, okay, we're going to start at 1. We're going to go up to 11, but not including. And because there's not a 3rd argument, Python's actually going to assume you're going to step by 1. So it's going to go through every single piece. So I actually don't have to pass in 1 right here. And if I do this, now you see I get 1 through 10 because it assumed that my step is 1. Any questions on that? I'm going to just do this. Does that make sense? I'm gonna give you guys this. So 2. Okay. So we've got that. I give it 2 arguments, but we can even become more efficient. I can implicitly just say this. If I just give 1 argument, what will happen is I can also not put a starting piece in my range. Remember, this first one is where does it start? If I only provide 1 argument, that is saying, where do you want it to end? Now, the caveat with that, and especially in this example, if I do it this way and I only provide 1 argument, by default, it doesn't start at 1. In fact, it actually starts at 0. So in range, by default, it will start at 0. So if I print this, it's going to also now have the number 0 because I only provided 1 argument. So it assumes that we're going to start at 0. We're going to go all the way up to, but not including 11. And because I didn't provide another argument, it's going to step by 1. Now, part of the issue, though, just to note, is let's say I wanted to start at 0, but I wanted to step by 2. I still have to provide all 3. Because if I were to do something like this, right, you're kind of thinking, oh, I want to go all the way up to 11 and step by 2. Python and the computer is actually just going to read that the same way it reads this. And it's going to say, wait, you want to start at 11. You want to go all the way up to, but not including 2. So then this for loop's not going to work. So if you are going to provide, or if you are going to do any step other than 1, you're going to have to do all 3 of these. Make sense? Okay. Now here's the most important piece and the thing I want to make sure that we know, because this is where it can get a little bit confusing. I'm going to have listy right here. And this is going to be a list of 2, 5, pizza, and true. Okay, here's my list. Right, I've just defined a new list called listy that's got 4 values in it: 2, 5, pizza, and true. Remember that range is just giving me numbers. Okay, so if I say 4 num in range, this would be really important if I cared just about the index value. We're going to see another one today in class where we can have actually the index and the value called enumerate. But if I used range for some reason, what I could do is I could actually say, real quick, range can only take in numbers, right? Because range just deals with numerical values. What is the number that I want to go all the way up to? If I wanted to go through this, I could also target this value how? If I wanted to say, get me pizza's value, I want to print that. How could I target that?
With the index.
Yeah, exactly. And what index would that be?
2.
2, right? Okay. So also, if I were to say print, let me X this out real quick. If I wanted to print the length of my list, len gives me the length, which is just how many values are in my list. I have to pass it the list. I want to see what size, like how many values are there. So if I were to run this, it's going to give me the number 4, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, if you remember from when we talked about range, I wanted to go all the way up to, but not including. It goes all the way up to, but not including, right? So if I wanted everything for 10, I had to add an additional 1, right? Well, if I'm looking at this here and I've got these indexes, let's just write down the index real fast. This is at index 0, 1, 2, 3. I see that my length is 4. So if I cared about the index piece, what I could actually do, because this equates to the number 4 is, I could say for I in range, when do I want it to stop? Len of listing. That is the same thing as me saying something like this. Right, len of listy's value, which we saw right here, was 4. So these are saying essentially the same thing. Len of listy equates to the number 4. So it's like I'm saying that. It's going to run this function and it's going to return this value right here. So this is what that becomes. Any questions on this part right here? Okay. So let's say I did want to print the values within my list. What could I do? Anybody have any ideas? I want to print the values in my list. We just talked about how could I get this value here?
So you could say when len to listy equals 2.
Well, I want to get all of the values, right? I want to print all of them. What could I do?
Print num.
Okay. What do you think? Somebody?
You just print the index of listy at num.
There you go. If I do this right here, I'm saying go into listy at the index of num. I want you to print that value. So remember, if I just say print listy num, it's going to print all of the values. Let's walk through what's kind of going on here. If I start with range, I only gave it one value, so where does it start? What number? Because I only passed it one value, where does it inherently start?
0.
0, right? Num represents that value. So in this case, num equals 0, right? Cool. So it's going to check and say, is 0 less than or equal or less than whatever this value is, which is 4. So we're just going to say, len of, I'm going to put just L for listy, but these are the same thing. That's 4. So we're going to say, is 0 less than 4? Yes, it is, right? Okay, so I'm in my for loop. I want to print listy at num. Num is 0, so it's like I'm saying print listy of 0. Cool, it does that. It adds 1 to my num. So now num is no longer 0. It's now 1. Let me erase all this junk too. Then my for loop's going to ask, is 1 less than 4? Yes. So then it's going to say print listy at num. Num equals 1. So it's like it's saying print listy of 1, which is this guy. Once it goes through everything in my for loop, it adds another one to num. Now num is 2. So then it goes, okay, is 2 less than 4? Yes. Okay, let's print listy of num. Num's value is 2. Gives me pizza. And then lastly, or not quite lastly, then it says, okay, let's add another one. Is 3 less than 4? Yep. Does the same thing. It says, okay, let's go ahead and print listy of 3. And then finally, num becomes 4. It says, is 4 less than 4? No, it's not. That means the condition of my for loop has been met, and it hops out and it goes on to the next line. Any questions here? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm still confused on that part.
Okay. Just remember range will always just give you, especially if you only give it one argument. Remember, if I say range of 4, like if I were to print that, that's going to give me 0, 1, 2, 3. I can take those values, and that looks very similar to when I had listy at position 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So I can use that, and as I step through here, I take those values and I apply it like this. And so it's like it's saying listy at position 0. Well, we know that that's 2. Listy at position 1 is 5, and so on and so forth. Again, if you've got a, if you've got a list, range is great if you want to deal with the index, or if you're wanting to say, I want to print all numbers 1 through 100, that's fine. Right, range is great there. I would say to default, and what we're going to really default to in class is something like this. Like typically, we're going to have a list or an array. We're going to have some value that we can iterate through. And this guy is going to be much easier. Much easier for, kind of iterating through all the values.
Hey, Will, I put in the chat a little quick blurb. Is there, because I'm trying to remember, I'm not an expert in Python, but I know enough to be dangerous. If you put listy with a semicolon, would that put all your values that are in that array? Or you would have to, because you were passing the argument for num in range ahead of that, that's not going to work. You see what I'm saying?
So,
instead of putting
yeah,
num,
you're trying to do a
putting
slice operator there.
Yeah, and so it would
Let's
put
try it.
all values in on your array.
Let's try it. See what happens. Might print it every single time. We'll see. Might break my computer. Yep.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, yeah. It's
So
gonna
this is
print
what we
foot-
call, this is called a slice operator.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about slicing today in class.
Cool.
But basically, it's a way that if I know the index, I can say I want to start at 0 and go all the way up to, but not including 2. So if I do that, it's just going to give me 0 and 1. So it's just a way to take a portion of my list away.
Got it.
But
And the
because
way,
because we didn't pass in an argument, again, by default, it's going to say start at the beginning. Like I could do this.
Yeah.
If I just did this, it's saying, because I didn't pass in this argument before the semicolon, kind of go in there. Because I didn't pass in an argument right there, it's going to assume we're starting at 0.
Yeah.
It's going to go all the way up to not including 2. And on the other side, does the same thing. Let's say I did 1, just right here. I say I want to start at position 1, but I do a colon, and I don't do anything after that. It's going to say start at position 1, give me the rest of the list. It's called a slice operator.
got it. And it's printing it 4 times because it's seeing the argument, the length of listy, and you got 4 things. So it's printing it 4 times then.
Yeah, because remember, num is not associated to my list. It is just a numerical value of 0 to whatever our argument is,
Correct.
which is 4. So it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's why it's just saying still num is less than 4, because num is 0, then num is 1, num is 2, num is 3. And it gets to 4. So David asked in the chat, so basically print listy of the slice is equivalent to print listy if no range is specified and no colon. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so instead of, like I could have just, so if I didn't pass in that argument and I just ran this, it's going to do the same thing. But where the slice comes in is, let's say you wanted, let's say you had some data and you were able to sort it, and you just wanted the most 3 recent ones. Depending on how you sorted it, maybe if you did it like if you're dealing with a SQL column, right, of date, and you had that sorted, right, and it was just a list of all the values. What you could do if you wanted the 3 most recent, you could just do something like this. Oops. 3. And this would give you the 3. Oops. 2. Yeah, it was 2. Oh wait, what did I do? It's different here. Oh no, that is right. It would give you the 3 most recent. So that's where the slice comes in. But if you're going to show everything, yeah, you don't need the slice. You could just do this guy. It does the same thing. They
Cool.
both do the
Got
same.
it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So it looks like it is time. So I'm going to stop this recording and then we will get started with class.